Most people don't actually want a clear picture of reality. They don't. They want a picture that lets them stay comfortable inside their existing identity. They want the version of events that keeps their current emotional story intact. They want the version of life where everything they already believe can remain unthreatened. That's the real reason that people reject the truth. It's not necessarily because they don't understand it, but because accepting it would require changing who they are. Now, Alan Watts, he explained that human beings mistake their social persona for the self. And when you mistake your role for your identity, you're willing to defend that role even if it requires you to reject reality. And Carl Jung, he also saw this. He explained that the persona is not just a courtesy mask. It's the psychological armor a person uses to hold their place in the group. If you threaten the mask, they take it as a threat to their very existence. That is why when you see things clearly and name what is actually happening, people step back. And it's not because you're wrong per se, but because you are dangerous to the emotional structure keeping their identity stable. They will not say that out loud. They don't even know that's what is happening inside of them. The average person is not self-aware enough to know what their motives are. But their behavior gives it away. You say something accurate and suddenly there's tension, right? You point out a contradiction and the conversation gets a little weird. You stop playing along with the socially acceptable falsehood, and people immediately treat you as intense or negative or too serious. Have you heard any of those labels? What that really means is, like, the translation to what that is you broke the shared illusion. That's what you did. There is a hierarchy of values in the human social world. And what's crazy is most people, they rank belonging above truth and comfort above clarity. Because here's the thing, most people, they want the group to reflect back to them a picture that keeps their identity coherent. They want their self-concept protected and their emotional equilibrium protected. That's why people who see through the illusion, they pay a pretty heavy cost. When you start seeing clearly, you stop being easily manipulated by social pressure, and people who cannot live without that pressure will not know what to do with you. And other than to distance themselves, people distance themselves because you no longer operate inside the script that they need to feel safe. You no longer cooperate with their self-deception, and you're no longer feeding into the system of mutual avoidance where everyone silently agrees to ignore the truth because it's far easier for them to maintain the illusion. So yeah, when you opt out of that, people will label you as intense or a problem in a sense. They'll label you all kinds of things: intense, too much, things like that. But yeah, there is a stage where this becomes confusing because you think to yourself, why are people uncomfortable? Like, I'm just describing what is actually happening. You think to yourself, shouldn't clarity help everybody? And you would think, but yeah, you assume that other adults want accuracy and that they want honest evaluation of reality, but most don't. Newsflash, most grown adults are just scared children inside. They need group. They need the group to validate their worldview and to confirm the narrative they already believe. They need social agreement more than they need truth. And this is where the isolation begins. You start to notice that the more precisely you speak, the less people can handle you. And it's not because you're attacking them, but because your presence makes them confront the parts of their life they'd rather not look at. Does that sound familiar? I mean, so you want to be accepted, and so you begin self-editing. You start withholding parts of your perception. And it's not because you want to lie, but because you learn that honesty is socially expensive. You see that accuracy costs status, and you see that truth costs belonging, and that it makes people uncomfortable. So what do? Well, you lower the voltage of what you say. Not because you're wrong, but because you learn that clarity has a price. But then a shift happens. One day you say something accurate. You watch how the room reacts. And then for the first time, you don't feel confused. You do recognize what's happening. You see through the game. Everything is calibrating properly now. You finally understand the discomfort people feel in your presence is not because your reality is incorrect. It's because your clarity threatens the illusion that they rely on. Alan Watts, he called this, he described it as waking up from a dream that most people don't even realize that they're having. And then Carl Jung, he saw this as the separation of the individual from the collective conscious, where you begin thinking with a mind that is not controlled by the tribe. And I've talked about this previously. I mean, that's the moment, that particular moment, it marks the beginning of what's called psychological adulthood. And this is where sovereignty begins, because once you see the structure of illusion, you stop expecting other people to validate your perception. And you stop waiting for them to join you in accuracy, and you stop trying to make truth socially safe. And you stop bending your perception to make it digestible to people who need illusion to function. Once you cross that threshold, you realize that your clarity is not a social tool, it's an existential one. Your clarity is what keeps your mind intact. It's what keeps your integrity intact. And it's what preserves the relationship you have with your own judgment. That is the turning point. You no longer speak the truth because you hope people will accept it. You speak the truth because your survival depends on not lying to yourself. And this is where the loneliness is born. Not because you can't find people, but because most people do not live in reality. They live in their emotional story about reality. They live in the narrative that protects them. The version of life where their wounds don't have to be confronted. When you see clearly, you become incompatible with that. And you become incompatible with people who need the illusion more than they need the truth. Seeing clearly forces you into a new kind of life where you don't chase social approval anymore. I feel like a lot of men, they're in that confusing stage in their 20s. I think I didn't really get out of the confusion until I was in my 30s. And then things started to make sense, and I started to have that clarity. And then social approval doesn't matter anymore. You don't try to make your mind smaller so people feel comfortable. You don't try to lower your standards to retain any proximity. You don't balance truth against acceptance like it's a negotiation that you can solve with better wording. You stop trying to fit into groups' emotional limitations, and you just accept the distance and the quiet and that separation. Because at that point, at that stage, clarity becomes more important than belonging does. And this is the actual entrance into adulthood. It adulthood isn't, it's not paying bills, it's not age, it's not more responsibility. Adulthood begins the moment that you stop outsourcing your perception to the tribe. The moment you stop looking at the eye of the others to determine what is real. The moment that you trust your own evaluation of reality more than the comfort of social consensus. I would say that's the threshold, that's the line. This is when you become your own person. This is why life technically begins at 40. But yeah, I mean, once you cross that threshold, something else happens as well. You develop new requirements for connection. You can no longer spend time with people who depend on illusion to stay functional. You can't connect with someone who deflects every truth that threatens their identity. You can't connect with them, you can't bond with them. You can't be around people who stay shallow to remain emotionally safe. You just can't. You can't feel intimacy with someone who punishes the person who sees accurately. So you stop trying. You begin choosing solitude over low quality connection. There's nothing wrong with that. You simply recognize that most relationships in modern culture are not relationships. They are unspoken agreements to not say what is real. They're just these unconscious contracts to protect each other's emotional story. It's this mutual avoidance dance. And when you live in reality, you can't participate in that anymore. You just can't do it. You learn that solitude is not suffering. Solitude becomes the place where your mind can be fully coherent. It's where you're not required to shrink for anyone else. It's a place where you're not punished for accuracy. Truth is allowed to breathe without any form of retaliation. And you stop feeling alone when you start respecting your own mind. The loneliness, it goes away when you stop betraying your perception. It just dissolves. That loneliness, it dissolves when you stop trying to trade honesty for proximity. What's the point of that? Loneliness, it ends when your relationship with your own experience becomes more important than whether someone else approves of it. You begin to learn that the only real danger is self-abandonment. If you allow yourself to lie to yourself just to maintain connection with people who fear the truth, you destroy the only instrument you have for navigating reality, your own cognition. That destruction is catastrophic. Betraying your own mind to keep the peace is much more lethal than sitting at a table alone with your thoughts. So yeah, I mean, clarity, it forces you to pick a side, really. I mean, you can either live in the comfortable, like the comfort of illusion with the group, or you can live in reality with yourself. There really is no middle ground. There's no compromise there. Truth and illusion cannot occupy the same space. So you have to pick. If you want to keep your mind intact, you must choose reality. even if it isolates you. Here's the thing. The more that you stop bending, the more you begin to attract the few who think the same way that you do. And yeah, they won't be many, but they will recognize you instantly, and you will recognize them instantly. It will not require any disclaimers or, you defending your clarity like a court case. I would say there will be natural resonance. I mean, the conversation, it will naturally go deeper, faster. There will be no awkwardness around honest evaluation. There's no recoil when the truth is named. And this kind of connection is rare, but it is worth more than an entire network of shallow relationships. Those are the only real allies you ever need. This is what Alan Watts was actually pointing at when he said the self is not the mask. And this is what Carl Jung meant by the individuation process. Seeing reality clearly is the initiation into adulthood. The cost is that you lose belonging with the people who refuse to wake up. But the reward is that you gain belonging with yourself. You gain your own respect. You gain your own authority and your own stability. Once you stop needing the world to approve of your clarity, the world loses control over you. They cannot bribe you into acceptance. They cannot punish you with rejection. They cannot manipulate you with disapproval. You become someone who will sit alone rather than betray your own perception. You become someone who is no longer hostage to the tribe. And that, my friends, is actual freedom. Freedom is not doing what you want. Freedom is thinking what is true without needing permission. Freedom is seeing reality accurately and refusing to dim the lights so others can stay asleep. Freedom is choosing the truth even when it costs approval. Because approval can't save you. Approval cannot save you. But self-honesty can. This is the price, and this is the power. Once clarity matters more than belonging, you stop living in their illusion and you begin living in your reality. You begin living in reality. You become sovereign. You become independent. You become someone who can carry truth cleanly without apology and without compromise. You become someone who would rather walk alone in truth than together in falsehood. That is what it means to see clearly.